important first line, which is welcome to our session on green iron trade today. I hope you can hear me all right. Good. I'm going to turn my own sound down a bit. Let's see. Yes, super. All right. Hey, welcome to this session on green iron trade. Super happy to see so many of you here this late in the day. I think that speaks to how important and interesting this topic is right now. My name is Amanda. I work for WWF. I lead on our global steel decarbonization work. In this session today, we're organizing together with Agora Industry, who does a lot of research on many things related to industry decarbonization and steel decarbonization, but also specifically related to green iron trade. We're going to hear more about that in just a second. We're also organizing it together with Stegra, a startup that is almost already producing near zero steel. Stegra is building their first plant in Boden, Sweden, and they will be producing near zero steel in the end of 2026. So that's Agora, Stegra, and WWF bringing this event for you. And checking my notes to see if there was something else important before I introduce our first speaker. So we're going to start today with a keynote speech from Dr. Julia Metz, who is the director at Agora Industry. Julia leads Agora's work on the transition towards climate neutral industry and across different geographies. And she has, prior to this, also been the program lead and headed a team on climate and industrial policy at Agora. And before joining Agora, Julia worked on energy and climate policy, and she's also been an active researcher. So today, Julia is going to tell us about Agora's work on green iron trade. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Julia Metz. The floor is yours, Julia.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Amanda. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you also to the teams behind this who have organized this. I think it's really great that okay, good. Our team members met at different events which were concerned with green steel, and actually developed the concept for this event, and it's really great that you managed to put together this great panel. What I'm going to do now is to present some results of an economic analysis that we did looking at the economic effects of green iron trade, both from an importer and from an exporter perspective. And we devoted lots of energy into developing narratives and also policy proposals that show the economic benefits both from an importer and from an exporter perspective, because these two perspectives are very different with regards to green iron trade, and this is also a very political topic because it concerns industrial policy. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the key findings. Basically, what we argue is that right now the steel sector is in a economic challenging situation with global overcapacities, high energy prices in some regions, and the steel sector is currently at a moment where it needs to refine or develop new strategies to become competitive in the future. And by implementing green iron trade, viewing this as an opportunity, this can generate competitiveness for the steel sector in the long term. And in order to do so from a European perspective, we need both domestically oriented industrial policy and also an approach to international collaboration. And the same is actually also true from a Brazilian perspective, which I'll also present in a minute. And if we look at the economic effects, actually we argue that green iron trade can deliver win-win outcomes for exporters and importers alike. For an potential importer country such as Germany, importing green iron from countries with rich renewables and iron ore resources such as Brazil, this can lead to a reduction of green steel production costs of 12 to 15% by 2040. And from a potential exporter country such as Brazil, for example, producing 10 million tons of green iron by 2040 could avoid 12.8 million tons of CO2, create around 35,500 jobs, and more than double export revenues when compared to exporting only iron ore, so not green iron ore. And in order to enable this, we need the right policy framework, such as strategic partnerships between exporters and importers, which also need to reflect the interests of the global south producers and in order to align with their development priorities. Next slide, please. So here you see the green supply chain and how the at which stages the green steel supply chain can be cut. So either you keep the whole value chain at one location, so starting from producing green hydrogen, then in a second step producing green DRI, so direct reduced iron, and also the steel making process, or you can decide to import the green hydrogen and so produce green hydrogen at one location, import it, and then do the DRI production and steel making at another location. However, as if you want to import green hydrogen for over long distance, for which you cannot use pipelines and it needs to be shipped, this is very expensive. So it's more cost effective to do the green hydrogen production and the DRI production at one location and then ship HBI. And this is the cost effects of this third step is what we analyzed. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is the cost effects of HBI production and imports in 2040 compared across different regions. And here you can see, if you compare HBI production in Brazil with HBI production in Germany, you can reach a cost reduction in HBI of 17 to 24%, depending on whether the cost of capital is being de-risked. So with de-risked cost of capital, you can achieve a cost increase about 1/4. And this translates into lower steel making costs in Germany of up to 15%. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please. Now, from a domestic perspective, from an importer country, what's important for us is that at the same time, governments need to invest into their domestic steel production, because right now for Germany, the government has committed to about 7.5 billion euros of support to existing steel makers to decarbonize their steel production, for in total 7 projects. And in the meantime, 2 projects have already been cancelled due to different reasons. However, the important point here is that it needs to be ensured that the other 5 projects are really being implemented for resilience reasons and also for reasons to develop the technology within the country. So this is phase 1, which we emphasize. Phase 2 is looking at Europe. It also makes sense to look at intra-EU imports. So, for example, that steelmakers in Germany look at potential production sites in renewables-rich areas such as Sweden, and that HBI can also be imported within Europe, and in order to strengthen the European market. And as a third option, we propose global DRI imports, and this is where Brazil, for example, comes in, because here the cost effects for steel making are most visible. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are 7.3 billion euros of state aid that I just mentioned for these 7 different projects, but this is really small, so we can go on. From an importer perspective, it's also important to look at the job effects, of course, because importing this first, importing green iron means also relocating this first step of steel making. And here it's important to acknowledge that around 90% of jobs in the steel sector are in the more labor-intensive steel making and steel finishing sectors. So with importing green iron, 90% of jobs can be kept domestically. And right now we are doing a more in-depth analysis looking at the direct and indirect job effects. So this is more a rough estimation, but it gives an impression of the shares where the jobs are allocated. Now this was the story for Germany. Now we turn to Brazil, and here, as I just mentioned, so in order to produce green steel, you need lots of renewables and high-grade iron. And here, Brazil has excellent opportunities because it has more than 90% of renewables share in its power production. Next slide, please. And it also holds some of the world's highest grade iron ore reserves. And actually also here in the northeast where we are currently, where we're currently located. By engaging in the production of green iron and green iron trade, Brazil can leverage these rich resources in renewables and in high-grade iron ore. Next slide, please. And these, for Brazil, we estimated the jobs effects and the value added. And for example, if we would assume that Brazil supplies 5% of global green iron demand by 2040, this would create about 35,500 jobs and more than double current iron ore export revenues. Next slide, please. Yeah, here we just show the comparison of current revenues or exports for 10 million tons of iron ore, and if 1.3 billion US dollars are being invested into the production of green iron, so investing into green hydrogen production and the green DRI production, then this could lead to a doubling, more than doubling of revenues from green iron ore exports. So a huge economic opportunity from, I would say, something that is being done anyway, so the export of iron, but if this next step is being done towards green iron, then revenues can be doubled. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm coming to an end. So I'm not going to go through all of these policy recommendations. The main point is that in order to enable this, governments need to implement both domestic policies to support the green steel industry. And next slide, please. And also engage in joint instruments for international collaboration, such as strategic international partnerships, establish offtake mechanisms, or also enable a financing of green iron projects. And with this, I hand over to you, Amanda, and I hope, I could provide some insights for the discussion.
You most certainly could. Thank you very much, Julia. I'm going to stand over here so we have room for our panelists. There we go. I think the topic of green iron trade is fascinating because on paper it's this simple exercise that seems like it's very easy to make it a win-win situation. But today we have a very wonderful situation because we are here in Brazil and we have managed to gather a really great panel which gives us the opportunity to really dive into how does this happen in practice, what can we do today and in the upcoming years to make this reality in the future and to make sure that if and when it happens in a way that is indeed a win-win situation for both exporters and importers, for workers in all of the whole value chain, and also, as a cherry on top, decarbonizes the steel industry, right? So I'm going to invite our panel onto the stage. We actually have 4 panelists and not 3, so that's another happy surprise for you all. Please come up on the stage and I'll present you as you come. Please, Miss Diana Aconcia and Luisa Orre, and Leonardo Pereira, come up on stage. And Elisabetta, there is a 4th chair for you. Yes. So, in the order of the slide, today we have with us Ms. Diana Aconcia, who is the Director for International Affairs and Climate Finance at the DG Klima, so that's Directorate General for Climate Action of the European Commission. Welcome. We're very happy that you could join us, and thank you for rushing from the last panel. Well done. COPs are not only about talking, they're also about running, apparently. And from Stegra, we have joining us today Luisa Orre, who is the Chief Business Development Officer, overseeing growth plans at Stegra, or outside of Sweden and at Stegra. And we're really happy that you could join us today. Thank you. And from the Brazilian Development Bank, we have Leonardo Pereira Rodrigues dos Santos joining us. Very welcome. He is the head of climate change department at Bendes. And as an extra, who's not on the screen, but you can see her here in real life. Sorry, is that me? We have the National Director, Elisabetta Colodetti, from the Brazil Industry Decarbonization and Hydrogen Hubs Initiative. This is a partnership between Brazil and the UK. It's implemented by UNIDO, and it's an initiative to accelerate industrial decarbonization by supporting the Brazilian government to unlock private finance and I believe also policy recommendations and a lot of things that we'll hear more about in a second. So welcome all. And we're going to start this off with a question for Ms. Aconcia. Or actually, this is a question for 2 people, but you're going to go first, Ms. Aconcia. It's also for Mr. Pereira. I wanted to start this panel with a question more broadly on what is the current outlook for green iron trade in your view? How much is it coming up in the day-to-day discussions that you're having right now? Go ahead, Diana.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. Sorry. In the European Union, the industrial competitiveness is one of the biggest conversations that is ongoing at the moment. We need to remain competitive, or better, to become more competitive while decarbonizing, and that's the challenge. And it's very clear that we cannot do this alone. In the European Union, we don't have everything that we need for our decarbonization and competitiveness, and we have to harness our partnerships, our network of trade agreements and other partnerships, and we hope that soon we are going to have another very important trade agreement with Mercosur, and to create those resilient industrial supply chains that we will need to fully decarbonize the European Union and the world. The European Union is only 6% of greenhouse gases emissions at the moment. Most of the emissions happen in the rest of the world. And if we want to decarbonize together, if we want to go on a low-carbon industrial transformation at world scale, the only thing that we can do is to cooperate. And in the EU, we have been pretty good at decarbonizing the energy sector. Last year, more than 70% of our energy was either renewable or low carbon, and we are decarbonizing it very quickly. But it's more challenging to decarbonize the industrial sector. And for it, we need to tap into the renewable and the green hydrogen resources of other countries. The conversation on green iron, I think it's still at an early stage. With the Clean Industrial Deal, that communication that was adopted in February, we are looking at how to create the lead markets for decarbonized products, how to create demand, because at the moment industrial decarbonized products are still more expensive than the traditional ones, and there isn't enough demand. So this is one of the issues for which we need a lot of investment, and you also need support from the public capitals. The other issue is to go find the sources, the materials for this decarbonization wherever they are more competitive. And in many partner countries, such as Brazil, South Africa, Australia, India, they have an exceptional renewable and green hydrogen potential that we do not have in Europe. So producing green direct reduction iron or hot briquetted iron in these regions can reduce global emissions efficiently and cost effectively, and also make European Union industry more competitive. But we haven't developed, I think, our analysis yet on how exactly to build these mutually beneficial value chains. So that's why I think the conversation that we are having today is so important, because I think it can be the beginning of this conversation on how we can collaborate with Brazil and with others. And since, well, Brazil is here, so how we can collaborate with Brazil with its clean energy mix and its the industrial development, let's say its industrial basis, to make the best of this for the European Union and for Brazil. And I saw that in the presentation before, they were talking about the global gateway and the clean trade and industry partnerships. Yes, these are two of the prime instruments that we are looking at to set this conversation in motion.
Thank you. Over to you, Leonardo, with the same question, actually. How much do you see this coming up in conversations? Do you see a lot of projects, proposals for green iron trade already today? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks Amanda for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here as a BNDES representative. Well, green iron is one of the possibilities and opportunities that Brazil has to develop. Okay, we have a very, I would say, a comparative advantage considering the renewables generation that we had here in the country. And we can take advantage of it to produce green products, not only HBI, hot-breaked iron, but also maybe green iron, green cement, and other products. Okay, Brazil has, as you know, is a major commodity exporter, but we are very open to foreign investment. And we have some platforms here for exports, including not only commodities but also some products, intermediate products and final products to several markets, including Europe. So it's a win-win partnership that we can build, we can work on. Of course, we have some challenges regarding infrastructure, for instance, transmission lines and things like this, and some regulatory maybe issues or challenges that should be addressed. But anyway, it's a very interesting opportunity. And you see not only Stegra's project, but also some other low carbon hydrogen products that we here at BNDES in Rio, we are trying to look at and try to address the main issues of those transactions, maybe to have a closing finance by 2027. Okay, they are very large transactions. And you see that for emerging markets, it's not easy to mobilize capital at scale for those transactions, specifically in industry. But we do see that we have, comparing to other emerging markets, a robust capital market and also a financial system that can support those transactions. Okay, and it is quite important for those transactions, specifically in industry, because here in Brazil, we still developing the project finance schemes for industry deals. So we have to address those points, but we do see a very good opportunity here.
That's actually a very good segue to a question I was going to ask you, Elizabeth, a little bit later, but let's take it now. The industrial decarbonization and hydrogen hubs were created to support policymaking, and I'm interested to hear from your perspective how do you see the decarbonization of Brazil's steel sector today, and how is the government preparing to address this, and what policy measures do we need? You're welcome to also go into the green iron trade already downward, and go ahead and.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me here. So the industry decarbonization and hydrogen hubs, they started as a partnership between Brazil and the UK. They were launched in 2023 at COP28 in Dubai. And the idea at first was to build this a project preparation facility, to build a pipeline of bankable projects or support the creation of this pipeline of bankable projects in Brazil related to industry decarbonization and hydrogen creation. But as we started the work, we saw that there was a need to take a step back and support the Brazilian, the Ministry of Industry and also the Ministry of Mines and Energy with some policy work that is necessary for these projects to happen. So I'm going to focus on the industry decarbonization one because I think it's more developed, and we have our E+ colleagues here that have been working really hard on everything policy related that we do under the hub. So we have been supporting the industry to submit their contribution to the climate plan, which is the main policy that will say how Brazil is going to implement its NDCs. And we're also supporting the development of what we call NG, the National Industrial Decarbonization Strategy, which will be launched here at COP on the 17th. It has changed from tomorrow to the 17th in the Brazilian pavilion, and is an instrument that's quite interesting because it not only talks about how industry should mitigate their emissions, but also how Brazil can take advantage of this moment and build new industries, new businesses, and attract new businesses and industries to the country. In terms of barriers and how we are working on those, so I think costs definitely is one of the main barriers. So investments are quite high when you talk about decarbonization of the industry sector. So I mean, I think everyone here is probably works in the sector and is quite aware of this. But as an example, Brazil was one of the countries that was selected for the CIF, the Climate Investment Fund, new window on industry decarbonization to receive $250 million to support industry decarbonization. And if we look at the projects, for example, that aren't in the BIP, the Brazil Investment Platform, there are a few that this is a fraction of what they need to happen. So cost, definitely one, and the overall regulatory uncertainty, because Brazil is still developing its regulation on hydrogen.
Thank you. And you mentioned new businesses joining, so it's a good moment to bring in Stegra. Luisa, you're doing this on the ground in the real world. I wonder, can you tell us a little bit about your project, and can you also tell us about the role of green iron trade in your business model and how, yeah, what role it plays? Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So for those that don't know, Stegra is building the world's first green steel plant in the north of Sweden. And we're able to reduce carbon dioxide emissions with 95%. And in our plant in Sweden, we have both the electrolyzers, the DRI tower that then makes DRI, and the full steel making plant as well. So that's 2.5 million tons in the first phase, ramping up to 4.5 million tons in the second phase. This project, very early, we knew that our mission as a company is to decarbonize hard to abate industries, and we know that 2.5 million tons of steel is not enough. It's a huge steel market, and there's a lot more that needs to be done. And granted, the biggest emitters are in China and India, but we still wanted to show that there is a possibility to do this. And what's been frustrating is also that the technology to do this has been around for decades, but there's not necessarily been the mechanisms that allow this, the business case to fit together and be able to be bankable. In 2023, we raised financing of 6.5 billion euros in order to start the construction of our steel plant. And next year, at the end of next year, we are starting operations and ramping up over 18 months. When we looked at this, when we started the project, some people said, well, why don't you just make the green iron first and sell it into the European steel industry? And the answer is actually we tried. But there was not a single steel company that would sit around the table with us because we were just this small startup in the north of Sweden. It was a very risky bet. What we needed to do was to show that there was demand for green steel, not from the steel industry, and not even only from the steel industry's customers, but also understand the demand from the steel industry's customer's customer. So in the end, the consumer. So if you look at the green steel that we sell at now up to 35% premium versus brown steel, that translates on the cost of a car, for example, to an additional cost of about 500 euros. And it's not for everyone, but maybe some of you out there, when you go to the supermarket, you buy organic eggs and you're willing to spend a little bit extra to get eggs that you know have been produced in a different way. So this is not enough, though. And in the beginning, every single steel company in Europe said, we're going to do this as well. We're going to do electrolyzers. We're going to do DRI. We're going to do... And so many projects were announced. I think we did a calculation. It went from 5 million tons of green steel to 45 million tons of green steel in Europe by 2040. Or no, 30, I think was the number. 40 was the number. And now we've seen, as time goes on, that it's actually not panning out. In the very beginning of this, on panels, I would hear steel companies say, well, we can do this, we can decarbonize. As long as the government subsidize half of our electricity costs, we can do it. Well, that's easy to say. And I think that's the thing when you take a step back and you look at what are the competitive advantages that we have in different parts of the world. And we really see that a country like Brazil, with its renewable energy, with its iron ore, but also I think we can't forget the tradition of iron making and the tradition of mining, that this is really a perfect fit to feed into the European steel industry. And I think it's a great insight also from the Agora study that showed that 90% of the jobs are in the steel making and the steel processing part, and only 10% of the jobs are in this iron making stage, which is not a very fun job. You're burning a bunch of coal, and so I think that's also something to change. The other thing, just to make sure because I think it's important from a European context, is if we look at this investment that we're making, as an example, in the north of Sweden, the majority of the equipment that we buy is actually from Germany. So I think that there is a different role that a country that has a tradition of steelmaking can also play in this transition. So we're very excited about our project in Brazil. We have a partnership with Vale, and we're looking at exactly that, at using the very high-grade iron ore from Brazil, doing the reduction of it and shipping it, which, by the way, we're shipping 30% less weight across the ocean, and supporting the steel industry in Europe, so that the steel industry in Europe can focus on what is its competitive advantage, which is a fantastic steel grades that are produced and delivered into, among others, the automotive industry in Europe as well.
Thank you. And Leonardo, I feel like Bendes is a very strategic part of the puzzle here when we're talking about new green iron trade projects happening in or being planned in Brazil. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you give priority to different projects. What is it you're looking for in the projects when you're looking at them?
Okay, Amanda, if I may, I will compare to the infrastructure. My background is infrastructure. So here you are at Belém, Pará. Belém, most of the people here, 70% of the people, they don't have access to sewage, treated sewage. So it's an enormous challenge to provide this kind of service for them. It's a concession that BNDES has structured, and now we'll be able to anchor a transaction of $5 billion, okay, which has a very high completion risk and also very high demand risk, because the cash flow is uncertain due to the income, average income of the population here. As you can see, we are not in São Paulo, we are not in Rio de Janeiro. So I'm just comparing to infrastructure because here we have a very high risk demand and also a completion risk. We do expect that we have, as Tegra and other sponsors are pioneers in this segment, a cost overrun, okay? That should be assumed by the sponsor, because the lenders will be some difficult to assume this kind of thing. But also we have a very high demand risk because of the premium price that we have. And of course, the banks, including BNDES, would like to know the cash flow, if it's secured, and if you have some companies buying this product from the sponsors. So we do see that in biofuels and also NBS, nature-based solutions, which are, I would say, much more riskier than a green iron transaction, that the offtake is crucial, is key for unlocking the willingness of the banks to starting assessing the credit, okay? And here in green iron, I would say that it's important not only to negotiate, I think it's not necessary to have a 20-year, 15-year offtake, but it's very important to have a negotiation regarding the volume and also the price, maybe the floor price, okay? Just to make it more feasible, because you are talking about a $2 to $3 billion transaction, and that's something key for BNDES and for other banks, okay? The second point is, of course, it's important to work with an EPC, okay? Good EPC in contractors in order to offload part of the risk, because we know that it's too much for the sponsor as well. But besides that, we do know that's important comparing to other green projects that we have in Brazil. It's important to have more appetite of the sponsors in this first transaction. So we do believe that it's important to have Stegra and other sponsors committing more, maybe 30, 35, or 40% of equity, okay? Having a more unleveraged transaction, because it's pioneer. and we have to mitigate this completion risk. And it's happening in biofuels, it's happening in also NBS, and I think it's in green products. In green products, it also happens. So have to enlarge the capital base. So we from our side have committed and have been negotiating with climate funds a first loss fund to be deployed into industrial projects. But OBNS, as you may know, has access to climate fund. Maybe next year we'll be able to have more $5 billion in climate fund, which can lower the cost of capital at 35 to 30% on average, which is quite important in Brazil because we have one of the most higher real interest rates in the world. So it's very important. We also have some innovative concessional fund for innovation, so we could apply those funds for this transaction. And as I was saying, we can anchor those transactions having maybe 30, 40, maybe 50% of the leverage, okay? Because it helps a lot to unlock the private sector appetite and willingness to co-finance with the bank. So I'm just comparing infrastructure because into this year, next year, BNDES will be able to approve $10 billion in infrastructure, in project financing schemes, and you're gonna be able to unlock 2.5 times this amount from the capital markets, so also the private segment. So I think it really applies to the Stegra's case, and it's something that we can work on that if you have a final investment decision within next years.
Thank you. And well, we're talking about trade flows and finance flows and a stable policy environment. So the next question is for Diana Concia. Question on safeguarding the EU ETS ahead of the revision next year in order to provide stability, as we hear it is important for this, for the first movers that already have made investments based on the timeline laid out in 2023 and for the end of reallocation for industry in the EU ETS. Is there also a need to maintain CBAM's ambition to make sure that the EU is viewed as a stable trade partner at a time when trade is, well, how should we put it, a geopolitical issue?
Thank you. That's, the million-dollar question, but predictability is very important. We have the European Union, we have clear targets for 2030, 2050, and soon we are also going to have one for 2040. We have found an agreement of our member states to have a 90% decarbonization target by 2040. So the big, they'll say the macro framework is there. And the ETS is and will remain the cornerstone of our climate policy. And with the ETS comes also the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the CBAM, which is something which is a necessary complement to take into account the fact that the European Union is a leader and has decarbonized before and faster than others. And therefore, there is a difference there that has to be field to prevent carbon leakage, so to prevent that at the end of the day decarbonized products are losing competitiveness vis-a-vis the products that are not decarbonized. And yes, the plan is to have CBAM enter into force next year as foreseen, and at the same time there will be the free allocation that are starting to be phased out. Now, this cannot be the only instrument. What you said, Luisa, it was music to my ears to hear a European company that is taking this kind of risk, but also to hear that you are effectively using investment in other countries to enhance your competitiveness. This is exactly the way that we see how this global decarbonization is going to work, using competitive advantages. But for that, we need to create the lead markets. We need to create the demand. And I would like to highlight 2 points or 2 actions that are foreseen under the European Union Clean Industrial Deal. And the first one is the Industrial Accelerator Act, which we're working on. and that is establishing, first of all, voluntary low-carbon product labels, starting with steel and cement. And once we have that, is also, first of all, is going to create a real differentiation of this product, so boosting the demands from the companies that want to be green. But it's also going to facilitate international trade, because it's also going to help partners to comply with CBAM. Second is sustainability, resilience, and also European Union content requirements in our procurement. And here the idea is not to shut out partners, because there will be a way for partners that are complying with the sustainable requirement to participate in the EU procurement. Procurement is a big part of the European Union demand, and we have to leverage it to make sure that we start, the public sector has to start creating this demand. And the third point I wanted to make is the use of international partnerships and the clean trade and investment partnerships that I made before. And I don't know who's going to be the next partner for this. The first one is going to be concluded with South Africa. But under these partnerships, we are exactly trying to enlarge the lead markets, because if we look at Europe only, our market is not big enough. The lead markets need to be taken up at global level. And with cooperating with our partners, for example, under the Climate Club, that is looking, among other things, at how to decarbonize heavy industry products, or with the coalition for compliance carbon markets that we have started with Brazil, and which promotes carbon pricing all over the world. With this kind of international coalitions, I think that we will be able to work to maintain trade, or even to boost trade, and to boost trade of green products, and at the same time to make sure that the cake of the lead markets for clean products is grown, because this is not a zero-sum game. We need to work with our partners on standard, on green procurement, on carbon pricing, to make sure that these markets, this demand enlarges, and therefore everybody can gain. And this is the way to escape the sort of trap of pitting competitiveness against decarbonization, or of saying that European Union has to close their markets to stay competitive. I think I should invite you to some event, or you should come and be the testimonial for what is happening. And it's really exciting. I mean, I'm here in Belém, listening to all the exciting stuff that is going on in the real world. The negotiators are in their room and they're arguing, but I have the impression that they're arguing on an old world, while the new world is happening here, thanks to companies and financial institutions like yours that are taking us forward.
Thank you. That's inspiring. My next question is for Elisabetta. And we're talking about EU policy, and you had a possibility earlier to talk a little bit about policy recommendations here in Brazil, but I wanted to press you still a little bit on policy recommendation specifically for green iron trade, and how, is it working? Yes. How you see this. Please go ahead.
Sure. So on the hydrogen side of things, we have been working with MME, the Ministry of Mines and Energy of Brazil, within the hydrogen hub. And one of the main activities that we have done is that we launched a call for proposals for hydrogen projects in Brazil last year. And we selected 12 projects, which 5 were prioritized for receiving support, and one of those, the CSN project, it is a hydrogen project for steel making. So we are close to the industry sector and understanding their issues. It would be lovely to talk more with Stegra to learn more about the project as well. We know it's in the BIP, so it's definitely a priority for Brazil. And what we have been seeing is and other colleagues have been mentioning here this today as well, is demand creation. How do we enable that? So people also here, my colleagues have also mentioned green procurement, financial instruments. How do we make sure, I mean, if we unlock demand, as again our E Plus colleague Hosanna is here, she always mentions that. So if we unlock demand, this will then generate. This will then unlock the whole rest of the chain, because if people are willing to buy green steel and pay for the green premium, then green steel makers will make sure to make the green steel, which will then requires hydrogen, so on and so forth. And the second thing that we are working on is regulation. So how do you, certification, and in that sense, how do you make sure that this green steel is really green, and you can guarantee that for consumers, but for the society as well?
Thank you. And I'm going to throw the same question actually to Luisa to see how your answers differ, because it's not easy being a front runner. Can you tell us about, are there any clear policy measures that you are missing? Is there anything, what do you need to make this happen? And what are where do you see the big holes, so to say?
Yeah, sure. And it's when it comes to, I've been in several discussions about lead markets, and sometimes I find that it's a slippery slope, because it's like saying, I have great news, I have a product, nobody wants to buy it. Just force somebody to want my product. And it's something in the kind of customer first, we have that as one of our values, that I find is a little bit jarring with that. But I think I would pick any time, I would pick 9 times out of 10 robust cost of carbon and CBAM over lead markets. And I think the insecurity that gets introduced with questioning, the EU ETS, or let's delay it, or free allocations up and down, I think that does more damage to the concept of putting a price of carbon that a lead market mechanism can't compensate. I think that's the fundamental issue. So I think that's one thing. The other is, especially now over the past year, that there's been this counter narrative that climate change is a hoax and it's just a complete waste of time and money. I think the people that are working on this, including policy makers, need to have courage and stand up and create narratives that say, we're excited about this, we're proud about this. It's not just about decarbonization, it's about competitiveness, it's about energy efficiency. Why would we waste energy when we can make the same products with less energy? So I think that there's something also about sharing positive stories, and I think there's a factor that you have to repeat something 12 times when it's good news versus once when it's bad news. So that's on the carbon price side. Then when it comes to, for example, if we take our project in Brazil, how could that become a reality? And we're a small company in the north of Sweden, and we're thinking, okay, let's do an adventure in Brazil. That's a huge risk. And so anything that helps us de-risk that is something that is very helpful to us. We are obviously working with a local partner, so Vale is a large mining company here that helps us understand the local setting. But then it's also about de-risking other parts of it, and BNDES is a very important such aspect. We're very happy to be a selected project in the Global Gateway, and that's important. But I think one thing that we also need to spend some time thinking about is these large capital investments, they require quite a lot of infrastructure. If we just take, I'm going to take the project in Sweden as an example. Our substation is 2,000 megawatts. We have to transport 4.5 million tons of goods, even more, 6 million tons of goods through a port and on rail. And typically, that's not infrastructure that's just there waiting for a customer to show up. But when we come with a business case to investors and we say, please invest in our company, they want to see that there's a feasibility in it, that within their site or within the next couple of years, that there's a path to getting to that. And that's across infrastructure, that's across permitting processes. It's basically across all of the risks that we as a company can't control that are on somebody else. And I think that's something where governments also can think about how to create a cross-functional, cross-ministry, cross-sectorial point of contact that can support investments like this in order to de-risk the business. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. I think we could continue this discussion for 2 more hours, and still it would feel like there are very many good questions left to ask. And those are the best discussions that sort of end with many questions still left on the table. How do we make sure both exporters and importers benefit? How do we make sure that we find the right ways to de-risk these investments? What's the right policy environment, and so on? And this is why the discussion continues, both here at COP and after, in very many rooms over the next years. I want to thank you all very warmly for this. It's been very, I've learned a lot, and it's very inspiring for me. I hope it has for our audience. And yes, a big warm round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
I haven't paid Luisa for talking about the ETS like this. I had never seen her before, but I have met a friend today. I'm really, could you please go around the world and spread this message? Because this is exactly what we think. If we water down our policies, your company is not going to happen. So that's a wonderful message. I really thank you for this.
That was amazing. That's a good tone to end on. Thank you all.